Okay, guys, I think we can jump right in. I want to welcome you all to another episode of the Change Talks. And in this episode, we have the honor of speaking with Vanessa Barboni Hallik, the visionary founder and CEO of the sustainable luxury fashion brand Another Tomorrow, which is very known for not only its stylish, effortless design, but also its innovative approach to circularity and material sourcing. And this will be the topic for this episode, sustainability, and how technology, innovation, or just the right mindset can help us drive fashion towards more sustainable practices. So I want to go straight in and ask Vanessa, because Vanessa, I know that your background is not specifically in fashion. So I'd love if you could share with us your journey and what inspired you to start Another Tomorrow.
Yeah, with pleasure. I'll try and give the really long story as short as possible because I think, like every founder, you sort of bring the sum total of your experience. Those are sort of the ingredients in the pot. So for those of you, I know you already know some of this, but I grew up in the Midwest, actually, in the US, which in and of itself was a little bit of an accident. It was my dad's first teaching job in Grinnell, Iowa, and I really kind of grew up in this unique ecosystem of academia, early access to technology, kind of the earliest stages of the internet, and creativity. And so I really always loved the idea of problem solving at the intersection of disciplines, in a way that was really kind of relevant for the world, and creativity actually played a role in that. So that was my upbringing. I couldn't have articulated that when I was, 8 or 12 or probably even 16, but I think that's, those are some of the common threads here. And then I accidentally found myself on Wall Street. I mean, truly, truly accidentally. And I started out actually as an options trader in foreign exchange. The one thing that is another thread, I think, was just my curiosity about the world. Coming from landlocked Iowa will do that to you. And so really found a home in first foreign exchange and then emerging markets, and went on to actually help them build and then rebuild post-crisis a bunch of businesses in the emerging market space, which I found absolutely fascinating. And it gave me, I think, a really specific perspective on kind of the global forces at work in these economies, but also just risk. And so I really kind of look at the fashion industry through that lens. And I think that's something to kind of tease out today. But long story short, after 15 years in finance, during which I was continuously trying to figure out how to pull together, my values and my day job, left 3 times, started a degree in energy and environmental policy and the like. In 2017, I actually took a sabbatical, ostensibly actually to stay in finance. So I started to do some early stage investing in climate tech and material science, and I really saw the potential for the redirection of capital to really change the course of our future. But in that process, I fell completely down the rabbit hole of sort of the horror show and opportunity that is the apparel industry. And I was just blown away. And I would say, first and foremost, I was surprised by my own lack of understanding and knowledge, having followed the kind of ESG space more broadly for quite some time. I was pretty shocked by how little I knew about the impact of this sector, how massive that impact was, and actually how complex that impact was. And in addition to that, really how so many of the negative externalities were driven by a risk-laden, really broken economic model that was driving both bad economic outcomes and bad impact outcomes. And so I kind of couldn't unknow it, and really felt that there was an opportunity for a case study for the industry in the form of a new brand, which was, frankly, a pretty high bar, in a world that already has way too much product, 80% of which doesn't get worn in our closets in a given year, and half of which, ends up in a landfill in a first year. It was tough to actually make that argument to myself, but really that's what Another Tomorrow is. It's intended to really model the future of fashion, thinking about fashion as a system, and being a commercially viable case study for what change could look like. So that's me, and that's us.
That's amazing. I wish I had a background in finance, because I admit this is my weaknesses. And speaking of that, like, how does this background in finance, especially with risk and resilience, inform your approach to fashion and sustainability?
I mean, the first thing that really struck me about fashion is it is such an inherently speculative industry, and when I say that, people push back and say, the film industry is actually just as bad. So if you think about the few industries that really take this kind of like, if you build it, they will come attitude, that is inherently really, really risky. And that risk actually exists all the way throughout the value chains. And that's really necessitated the need for these massive margins and this kind of race to the bottom in terms of costs that I think really drives a lot of the negative externalities, and massive overproduction, frankly, massive misproduction. We're just making a whole bunch of stuff that actually we don't know if anybody wants, and most oftentimes they don't, and certainly not at full price. And so I've really looked at the industry of how do you actually de-risk the industry through new business models? And how does that de-risking potentially improve both economic and impact outcomes throughout the value chain? So that's kind of my lens on risk.
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned that the fashion industry often operates in this linear, almost inflexible way. But then when it comes to partnering with your manufacturers, how do they respond to your view, your problem? Do they feel that this is a problem for them as well? Do they assess and try to help you out, solve this issue? How is this collaboration with your suppliers?
It really depends. I think it depends on the mindset. I think, this industry is really built or has been built more recently on outsourcing, right? And so it's been this, there hasn't necessarily been this element of like shared risk and partnership. So just even having the conversations in some cases is weird. Obviously we built our supply chains with like-minded partners, but even so, some of them are quite accustomed to working in a model that has, relatively high MOQs, relatively long lead times. And so if that's been working with our customers, it may not lead to, a sense of a desire to take a risk and take a chance. Nonetheless, we've definitely found a subset that see the opportunity in having a more flexible system. And for us, that works quite well because we have these custom platform fabrics. We've got a merchandising model that really aligns to this. And so we found common ground in a couple of manufacturers in particular who really want to help us build this, really demand responsive model and can also be much better for them as well.
Yeah. And do you feel the need to communicate this to your end consumer?
In terms of the supply chain and risk piece of it?
Yeah, yeah. Like an educational.
Yeah, it's such a great question. One of the challenges that we have because we do take such a systemic approach is that we have a lot to say. And so you do have to streamline the messages because it's quite complex. And so I would say on the supply chain side, most of the conversation that we're having right now as it pertains to risk and things like MOQs, things that are less familiar perhaps to some of the consumer base, is largely in more of a B2B industry construct, as well as an investment construct. And the good news is that, many of our customers can be found in those arenas as well. But right now on the consumer side, we're more focused on education around supply chain and circularity, in terms of sourcing and circularity and those important behaviors, and a little bit less so on the back end of things, in terms of on-demand manufacturing and the like, but very focused on the industry setting on that subject.
Got it, yeah. And I was speaking of another tomorrow in specific. How is the brand approaching supply chain innovation? How is it different from the traditional model? And what process that you want to share with the group here to enlighten us? What is working? What is the challenges that you are facing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would think one of the first pieces of my own education was that fashion is, when it's not made of plastic, it is actually an inherently agricultural product. We don't think about apparel in that way. And so we've really focused on the fact that the impact starts at the fiber level. Whether that's a virgin or a recycled input, the impact starts there. And so we had the opportunity, and coming from a blank slate, to really build our supply chains from the fiber up wherever we possibly could. And so that's been our starting point. And we've done that, from the base to the top of the value chain, really taking science-based environmental impact, human and animal welfare into account. and having that full traceability that we then are able to track both internally as well as expose to the consumer through our approach to digitalization, which has been really exciting and something that I think isn't inherently scalable throughout the industry. Albeit if you're an existing brand, you might have to take a slightly more piecemeal approach to how you approach that and have an internal case study first. So that's how we built it in terms of our emphasis on natural, organic, and regenerative materials. We also view next generation materials as being a crucial part of the solution. But I think for anyone who's followed material science, you know that this is not an overnight flip of a light bulb switch. And so it's really important, I think, to take a portfolio approach. We've been focused in the material science space because we really don't use synthetics. We've been less focused on synthetics alternatives. That's a huge, important problem for the industry to solve, but it's not the problem that we've had to really solve. So I don't want to, reduce the importance of synthetics alternatives as a space that I've been personally active in as well. But for us, we've really focused on two things. One is leather alternatives, because we don't use anything where you have to harm or kill the animal. That really reduces the availability of materials. So we've really focused on entirely bio-based and compostable or biodegradable leather alternatives, of which there are very few, but there are a couple coming to market. And those for us also have to have the same technical properties, hand feel, durability that the consumer would expect in the luxury space, which means that you're really, really careful about what you bring to market. And so for us, that's been a 3-year process that we're just about to commercialize, which is really exciting. The other area of focus for us in biomaterials has been alternatives to virgin cellulosics. So we do use certified virgin cellulosics. We don't love it. And that's an area where we've really been focused on things like carbon sequestering seaweed and algae alternatives that can generally be blended with cellulosics and still retain those really important properties. So that's what we're doing, but I'm happy to pause there and then dive a little deeper around where some of the pain points are in this strategy.
Yeah. I always say that a brand cannot be 100% sustainable, but it can be ASAP, as sustainable as possible. And I see that within sustainability, demand responsive manufacturing is one of the pillars that we're tackling. Material engineering is one of the topics that you're also tackling. Any other pillar within sustainability that Another Tomorrow is pushing some efforts on?
Yeah, I mean, circularity for us is a huge one. So I think fundamental to our business is the idea that clothing needs to be treated like an asset again. So, if you think about where the innovation has been in this industry over the last 30, 40 years, it's been really efficiency in getting faster and creating more disposable garments, right? So we want to swing that pendulum back and really reinforce the cultural message, as well as kind of the ease and opportunity for customers to treat clothing as an asset again, which can oftentimes actually have the same or better economics on kind of a price per wear basis, but it requires a lot of education around that. So that certainly informed, our positioning in the luxury space, because things that are asset-like have to retain their value by definition. But then we wanted to create, really like the certified pre-owned car model, that BMW model in fashion. And so we decided to really leverage digital IDs for authentication to underpin that, and also to underpin our ability to deliver the same service, the same customer experience, whether you're buying first or secondhand on our platform. And so we've had that experience live for almost a year and a half now, but we've had the digital IDs ever since we launched. So we've had these inherently digital products that has been a real boon to that. But keeping products, high quality products in circulation and using that as an opportunity to reduce the production of new product, I think is one of the most important things that we can do to evolve this industry. And there's plenty of product trapped in closets, plenty of product, plenty of money trapped in closets, just waiting to get out.
Yeah, this is very interesting to hear, because I don't know how it's different from the US with Europe, but the European Union is setting a lot of regulations to tackle that. And it's almost like giving accountability to brands on the products that they create, like from the time that they start ideation. And I believe there will be they just regulated now in July 23rd. I forgot the name of the regulation, but it's a tax on every product, almost like a responsibility fee on each product that you put on the market. And then also within these regulations, product passports, like digital IDs that you mentioned, will be mandatory by 2025. There's a lot of effort from the government to push more sustainable practices and also how to regulate that and minimize greenwashing, especially. But how are you dealing with these regulations? Because Europe is different from the US. Do you have any light to give the group on these challenges with regulations, especially how it is working in the US?
So, Europe is really leading on this massively. I mean, the US is light years behind. But I actually don't know how much that matters. I used to take a slightly different and more cynical approach, but I actually think what Europe is doing for anyone who's operating globally is of huge significance. So we're thrilled that we're set up for it, that we have the infrastructure there to begin with, which I think is a good hopefully case study to others to move ahead of regulation, not wait for it, because it's a heck of a lot easier when you've got the infrastructure set up for it. The US, we've seen very, very light regulatory approaches. I would say that the most movement has really been at the state level, and I would say both in terms of really specific, like banning of specific pesticides, some of which have been banned in Europe for quite some time, improved labor regulations in California, for which there's now some appetite to expand federally, but really it's been very, very light. And so I think that Europe is really leading on this. And the key challenge for more domestic brands is to make sure that they're really following global regulation and not just domestic regulation, because that's really going to lead. But I think it's super exciting.
Now, I'd love to bring other people in the group to ask questions and interact with us as well. But I just want to leave my last question, because I want you to poke the bear in the industry. So I'd like for you to say, even from a personal point of view, what are the industry norms or practice that you think that need to be challenged or changed?
I really think that the production system is at the heart of it. For as long as we continue to, put our finger in the air and try and predict, what people want through a really inflexible production system, we're going to continue to put product out into the market that doesn't get bought and needs to be, either aggressively marked down or disposed of. So I would really challenge that part of the system. And I think that the beautiful thing about that is that better impact outcomes will also come alongside better economic outcomes. And we need to think about risk in the same, at the same level that we think about, cost or margin, because I think oftentimes risk is eclipsed by that. So it's a different kind of way of thinking. But, I think until we solve that, we can put a lot more organic cotton into the market, but nobody buys it. That's still fairly wasteful, right? So I think that's really important. The other thing really is the importance of policy, right? I mean, we exist to be this like living, breathing case study, but as long as all of this is voluntary, I think we've seen that the pace of change is way too slow. So I think what's happening on the policy side is absolutely crucial. But happy to open it up and chat with all the experienced folks we have on this call.
Yeah, well said. I'd love to start with John.
Okay, so Vanessa, you said a lot. So let's rewind that tape a little bit on especially on risk. A key word for you as well as everyone on the call, but can you define that a little sharper? Is it the risk and uncertainty of what sells? Or do you mean that in kind of a financial picture, or does it really mean inventory? How do you create an equation for another tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, we've approached it in multifaceted ways, but I would say ultimately we think about risk in a couple of ways. One, it really is what is that balance sheet and liquidity that balance sheet look like, right? So if you've got a bunch of cash tied up in product that you don't know if it has a home, that's highly problematic. And that can be problematic for, a number of different reasons. But I think that, customer preferences are clearly one, and macroeconomic is another. Risk comes in many, many different forms. That ability to transform physical product back into cash, I think is fundamental in terms of knowing how well you can do it, knowing how quickly you can do it. I think that's really inherent. So I think about this in terms of a way of, how do you actually kind of create an anti-fragile fashion business? I mean, that's kind of putting things all the way on the extreme end, but in a world where I think change is the only constant, and we're seeing that in many respects these last years. I think that should be the goal, right? How do you actually create a system that's built for that level of resiliency and responsiveness?
Okay, so how do your suppliers respond to that?
Oh, in a variety of ways, right? Like, I mean, if you're a supplier who's doing pretty well in the old system, right? And the old system being you've got lots of clients who pay you on time and give you large and consistent orders and large volumes, you might not be that excited about that. But if you're a supplier that's seen volatility in orders, if you're a supplier that suffers from significant seasonal bottlenecks, if you're a supplier that's looking down the pike and seeing that there are parts of the customer ecosystem that are potentially experiencing some level of fragility, then all of a sudden you can start to take a slightly different approach to this and say, gosh, if I had a more diversified customer mix, if I had a less seasonal, product cycle, if I had smaller order quantities, and if I could think about, shared risk with my customers, I might be actually in a more resilient place. Then we're seeing more appetite. But this is an industry where people have been doing things the exact same way for a really, really long time. And so I think you're talking about 10 to 30% of your supplier base who's going to have some level of curiosity and appetite. But the cool thing is that once these things work and you can demonstrate that they can work and that they can work for others, that really helps. So I'm of the view that you've got to start somewhere. And for us, luckily, our business model and our merchandising mix in particular just lends itself to this because we've created this library of custom materials that we can basically platform and then manufacture into, in a really efficient way.
So are you an outlier with your suppliers, a bit of an exception, or are you finding, suppliers that, fit this model for you and others?
We are still quite the outlier, I would say. But the interesting thing is that if you look at other businesses, right, in terms of, that kind of 80-20 rule, and how actually few of their products are making up the bulk of their revenue, there are lots of other businesses that would benefit from this approach. And so, our goal is, again, to, kind of do the painful work, do it for our own, economic and resiliency benefits, but then also kind of get out there and spread the word to other businesses who actually might have many, many, many more products, but actually whose fundamental business is underpinned by core product in not dissimilar ways that we think could benefit.
Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely see that when driving innovation to foster sustainability in the fashion industry, collaboration is key, especially in this dual supplier brand. Maybe Brad, do you have any point of view on the supplier side to add on this?
Absolutely. You know me well. I think so. There's a couple things here. Vanessa's done a really good job of taking an elevated brand and driving it to where we're thinking about the supplier view. So the work that I love what you said, Vanessa. You have to start somewhere, and we believe the same. And I have been doing that over the last 10 years. What I find really, really interesting is that there's a give-get with shared risk. So if Vanessa comes to me as a supplier and says, I've got a specific fabric platform, I've got a set of chassis, we can share the risk on that side if you can be flexible in supply. And it does exactly what Vanessa says. You de-risk, you de-seasonalize, all of those things work. I think the bigger challenge is, as an outlier, it's difficult for a manufacturer to shift what they're thinking about and shift for just one customer. So I'm sure that's been dealt with. But the piece that I love, and I would love to hear you say more about, Vanessa, is the impression of elevated brands is that they're highly fashionable, and they don't have a lot of core products. And every season you're hitting the reset button and you're starting over brand new with a bunch of new products and fabrics. But that creates risks. So tell us, I would love for you to say more about how you found a space inside fashion that's not as highly variable as it may seem. You know, you've got elevated basics in the mix. You do some fashion stuff, but you're not going big on fashion as a speculative buy, right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So we basically, we created a merchandising strategy that internally we call like the wedding cake, basically. And we don't talk about this very much with customers, but I don't know, maybe we should. And essentially the way that we think about it is there is some level of newness and evolution that is required both for customer psychology and for business evolution. But you need to right size that and think about the risk of that evolution. So if you think about like, a wedding cake, so the biggest layer, this base layer is what we call like our AT essentials. This is the product that we're moving into on demand, or I should say demand responsive manufacturing. It's a set number of styles leveraging custom fabrics that can be platformed. These have like 100% product market fit, relatively less seasonality, really kind of pretty quick turn. And so this is really ultimately about inventory efficiency more than anything else. So inventory efficiency, capital efficiency, et cetera. So that's that base layer. Pretty simple product, cut and sew. Next level up is what we call internally our core collection. Pretty similar in that it's 100% product market fit, a little bit more seasonality just in terms of weather more than anything else. Custom platform fabrics, slightly more complex product design. So like, the jacket that I'm wearing, you're not making that overnight, right? It's going to take longer. But ultimately, we're going to leverage our learnings for those AT essentials and apply them to that middle level of the wedding cake. So again, no product, really no fashion risk to that. The customer likes it. It's just about, right sizing seasonality and inventory. Now then you get to like the top level of the wedding cake, and that's where what I call like evolution. That's where the seasonal new product is coming from. Now that new product exists for a few different reasons. One, it's product that we're testing to go into one of those two other levels of the wedding cake. So we don't have enough data yet. It's a brand new product. We think it belongs in one of those other two levels, but we don't know yet. It's product that is maybe a core product that gets a new colorway. So by definition, it's, same body, new color. Who knows? People like or dislike, purple this season. Like, I don't know. I mean, there is some data to support maybe yes or no, but we don't really know. So you're going to test that. And then there's like true fashion, new fabric, new silhouette, completely new, and really like who the heck knows. Again, some predictive data, but you don't really know. So for those first two levels of the wedding cake, no risk. So we feel pretty comfortable effectively like having that on our balance sheet. We just want that to be as efficient as possible. So that in D2C, that works. We want to probably have most of that D2C, never gets marked down, got to protect against that, want to realize full margins. But at that top level, that's where there's a lot of potential for shared risk, right? So that, and when I talk about shared risk in that context, I'm talking about distribution. So that's where we're leveraging our wholesale relationships to buy into that product as well. They happen to like newness for their customer base, so it serves that up on their end. And it lets us also share the risk in terms of testing those new products on a wider consumer base. So that's really how we've structured it from a merchandising mix, and increasingly on any of the core product, to the extent that we're offering that to third-party players, it's on a replenishment only, zero markdown cycle. So you're really managing also the potential risks of your distribution relationships in terms of maintaining brand equity and making sure that you don't have core product being marked down.
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but I just want to say something real quick before I do. I think, Vanessa, you're a shining example of taking the industry and flipping it on its head. And, it has to come from folks like you. And I also believe that the manufacturers like myself, we have to come together in the middle and say, this is how this works. That takes off, you do another and another and another. Unfortunately, the industry is really big. We're globally $1.9 trillion, but there was $1 trillion lost in markdowns. So the case for this is big, but we're going to have to do it one step at a time. it will hit an upward shaping curve. There will be a moment because of people like you and because of people like Louis and team and because of people like Renee and John, we're going to come together and it's gaining speed. And I think John has said it well. It's coming. We're going to war. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate you and what you've done and publicly. And then I'll have to leave. I'm sure we'll touch base again.
Well, I
Nice to
feel
see
very
it.
much the same way. Thank you so much.
Okay. Nice to see everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Vanessa, it's truly inspired, and it's not because you're making it super radical and complex. It's almost like you're making the logical shift.
Yeah.
And I don't know why fashion has never worked this way. I know where the triggers that led us to mass production, which led to overproduction, came from, how it's being built since the Industrial Revolution. But there's no reason for us to operate on that, and it doesn't even require super crazy technology. It's just a shift on mindset and understand the consumer. And actually now we have better technology to help us make more informed decisions, to react to trends faster between seasons. And so there's no excuse to truly shift to a more demand responsive model of production.
So Vanessa, I asked you about suppliers. What about on the consumer side? And as I understand it, you've got sort of multiple distribution points. You're direct, you're also through Farfetch, you're also, have elite wholesale partners like Neiman Marcus. So how do you balance that mix?
Oh God, in terms of what the customer is demanding or how we fit into the customer psychology?
Well, yes, but it leads into the decision of what risk you're going to take based on, these partners and distribution channels.
Yes. So everyone fits in a little differently, right? So on the direct channel, I'm very sensitive to product market fit and risk and capital efficiency. So that's really what's led to this, merchandising mix in terms of the risk that we're managing. We also have to manage that brand equity risk. So when it comes to, how we're thinking about other channels, we've got to make sure that we're managing our brand positioning, our brand equity in terms of, both how the product is displayed and markdowns as well. So I would say that, our philosophy has really evolved over the last 3 years. So, to state it, when we first launched, we were predominantly direct to consumer, and we had one strategic wholesale partner internationally. And we thought that we, in particular, really needed that to cement the right brand adjacencies with the customer in the luxury segment. We thought that was really important. But increasingly, we're very, very customer focused. I've come to the view that you really have to meet the customer where they are, and particularly in the luxury space, and it's true in others, but particularly in luxury, there's some pretty rigid purchase pathways. And if you, are just purely focused direct to consumer and you're thinking about efficiency, I mean, if somebody's a diehard Neiman Marcus customer, you can have the best product, the most sustainably sourced on the planet, and you can feed that customer, ads until the cows come home, and you better believe that they're never going to convert, right? So if you care about that customer, you've got to meet them where they are, and do that in the best possible way for your business. And we've found that there are great ways to do that. So we've come to really, we love wholesale for the reasons why, I described, but we manage it carefully in terms of that seasonal product and this replenishment program for core product to really protect us. But equally, we really love marketplace models when they're well run. And I think that that's going to be a big evolution of the industry because, if you think about sort of the insanity of all of this on a single brand basis, the risk is that much more amplified in a multi-brand inventory-based construct because you're not only having to predict for your own set of customers and your own product, but a multiplicity of brands and products, and it's pretty wild. So we think that we're going to continue to see the industry evolve toward more of a marketplace model. And we love that. And we've had a really good experience with Farfetch in particular, but we've also even taken a marketplace approach to more traditional wholesale partners in certain instances. And we've been the first to actually request that from our end to say, hey, we actually don't want you to buy this inventory. We want to be a marketplace partner for you. And like I said, in many cases in the designer space, we've been the only ones. So we really think about it, you know, kind of across the board in terms of our risk management, our brand equity management, but also really our ability to really connect with that customer where they are, as opposed to just assume that we can bring them into our own channel. Because I think that we've seen over the course of the last 10 years with this, you know, huge slate of digitally native brands, that there are significant limitations to that commercially as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
I have a
that was a
question,
lot.
Vanessa,
Go ahead.
regarding it just came to my mind because it's a hot topic now, the recycling in fashion as one of the pillars in sustainability. We have the team that think recycling is at least a positive effort, but the other side claims that recycling is actually bad. It's even worse. If you didn't succeed in your sustainability strategy, recycling is your last resort. Have you done an analysis on this? Is Another Tomorrow doing anything regarding recycling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like a devil's in the details kind of a situation, because it really, really depends. I mean, I will say that, you know, at the outset, we just have really poor municipal recycling opportunities in the first place. So just like the baseline infrastructure for efficient recycling is pretty nascent, and is what's causing a lot of the problems. I mean, I would say, you know, again, our approach has been treat clothing like an asset, make sure it's got high product integrity, high longevity, and you can keep that product in the system for as long as possible. So that's the ultimate goal. Now, there are things that we make that don't fall into that category, right? Like you probably don't want to buy one of our white t-shirts after somebody's worn it 72 times, right? Like that's probably not not a huge, I would have a hard time marketing that to you. So at some point, recycling does become an appropriate end of life solution. It's certainly a heck of a lot easier for mono materials versus blended materials, and all kinds of science, you know, behind all of that. You know, you could argue that brands should be, you know, completely vertical in their recycling. That's very, very difficult to do. So I think ultimately what we need is we need better recycling, more efficient recycling solutions in terms of both energy as well as like localization. And I think we're starting to see that come to bear, but I think that really does require a policy response. So it's not our first priority because of the nature of our products and our philosophy on the product, but I think, you know, it's for things that are worn really close to the body generally, and will wear out eventually over time. You know, end of life solutions I think are totally appropriate. Where I think I've taken more issue is, you know, things like recycled polyesters, right? Where it's like been a big push for a lot of companies because it's an easy thing to say and do, and in many cases, you know, economically it's not been a big pain point. But it doesn't solve things like microfibers, right? And it doesn't solve reliance on plastics. So I think things like that can be a little bit more of a fig leaf, which is, you know, pretty can be problematic. But even there, I wouldn't categorically say, you know, you should never use recycled polyester, because I think that that's unfair. But we've tried to take the approach that is most appropriate to both our brand and our philosophy, but recognize that systemically there are just a lot of challenges, even for brands who really want to do the right thing in this space because of the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, and I believe for any brand that wants to consider recycling, also knowledge on the design part, like the designers need to make good design choices, you know, and they need to be educated as well, because most of the designers, they don't know that they cannot mix materials if they want to recycle the garment in the end. And this needs also to be educated.
Yeah, design for disassembly. I mean, I was just having a conversation yesterday with a young woman who just graduated from one of the top design schools in the world. And she had 0 sustainability classes as part of her core curriculum. And that to me is completely insane. So it also starts there.
Yeah. Another key takeaway that needs to be changed, education. Okay. Any last comments for anyone? Questions? We are running out of time, but we can still have another.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi, this is
Hi,
Sydney.
Sydney.
Hi, John. Great to see some familiar faces. Thanks for sharing your story. I'm really keen to just learn a little bit more about your design timeline, like your design to hitting the market, like that speed to market piece, because I obviously understand that you've got more elevated essentials, you're hitting the luxury customer, but is speed in that ideation to PO important? And if so, how are you trying to remedy that in your process to suppliers?
Yeah, I mean, it is really incredibly variable for us, and I can give you sort of like the tightest end of the spectrum and also the longest end of the spectrum. You'll see what I mean, because it's definitely important. So we now have one new supplier in the mix, where if we are working on an existing fabrication, and like I said, we have this materials library, they can turn around a prototype leveraging 3D design in 5 days. That's incredible. And we've never had that level of speed in our mix previously. So that is a new evolution and a huge one from our side. So that's like the extreme tight end. And we're not usually not approving a first proto, but let's just say you could probably iterate within a couple of weeks. So that's huge. On the complete opposite other end of the spectrum, we are working on commercializing a product with this bio-based leather alternative, and it's been 3 years. Like it is, but that's been contingent on the materials science solution. So that's really the extreme end of it. I would say that if you're looking at our sort of like essentials collection, broadly speaking, thinking about time to market in the context of like a couple of months. If you're looking at like true fashion with new seasonal materials that have to be custom developed, that can be anywhere from 6 to 9 months. But it works for us because it's a small portion of the collection. If we were contingent on all of our product being in that category, we would have an incredibly inflexible and non-resilient business, even if the inputs were perfect. So for us, it really is about those percentages and being able to operate at multiple speeds at once, and having a business that does function by and large on core product.
And do you think the speed is inherently dependent on the materials library? Like that's kind of where this, okay, thank you.
That I would say materials library, as well as technological sophistication at the factory level. And I would say that is highly, highly varied. But materials first. It's definitely materials first.
All right, question, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Vanessa. It's Bruce McDermott. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, thank you. Good. So maybe a good way to end the call at this point, or end the questioning at this point. You're approaching break even probably. If you were to hold CapEx at this point, you are break even, but you're not going to do that, obviously. As you now move forward, from the formative stage to the growth phase of the business, what do you see maybe 3-5 years down the road for the company? What are the strategic initiatives that you are really inclined to pursue, and what's your vision of what this company is going to look like maybe 3 years from now? Thank you.
Oh gosh, that's a big question. So, we've really thought a lot about how does our philosophy scale, right? Because one of the key parts of our mission is this has to scale. Otherwise, like everything that we're doing is just like really cute and niche, and it just reinforces that argument that you can do all these things and that's great for niche brands. So the bottlenecks that we really wanted to unlock and that we've worked on have been one at the fiber origin, right? So the inherent scalability of farm traceable supply chains. You've got potential bottlenecks at the fiber level, at the textile level, at the manufacturing level. And so we've really focused in particular over the last 18 months on unlocking those potential bottlenecks to scale so that we can do more of what we're currently doing without breaking the model. So that's a little bit backward looking, but there's still a little bit of work to do in some of the new supply channels, like these biomaterials that I referenced are just hitting kind of commercial scale. The other is really taking this philosophy on demand or demand responsive manufacturing into the rest of our merchandising mix, because the bigger you get, the more risk there is. And coming into this industry with the perspective that I have, the idea of scaling dramatically without creating more resilient supply chains to really be able to run the business the way that we want to, in terms of inventory management and the like, is not something that's particularly appealing to me. So we're really, 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 really focused on this demand responsive manufacturing piece of the equation. But ultimately, our goal is to be a globally relevant brand that is truly modeling and continuously modeling what the future of fashion can look like in a systemic way, really at the intersection of high integrity design, innovation, and science-based sustainability. And all of those things are going to continue to evolve. So I think that our product assortment is likely to change. I mean, I specifically say high integrity design, not fashion, for a reason, because I think that it can extend to other product categories, putting our customers still at the center. Science-based sustainability is a continuous evolution. And so we'll continue to be really responsive to that, and in particular, making sure that we're able to measure what we're doing and make sure that we're spending our time, energy, and resources in that direction. And really, again, on the innovation side, in terms of digitalization, circularity is a huge push for us. We'd love for the, re-commerce to be above 20% of our business. We think it's really important. And leveraging digital IDs to also enhance the economics of the business, from acquisition cost through to customer lifetime value. So we've got a lot to do.
Yeah, and Vanessa, I think one big value that you also created through your journey is the inspiration that you care to bring also the right partners next to you that share the same vision, the same values that you do. So you can also always count on Platform. I think we had our mission aligns very much what you said through this whole episode. Platform is on a mission to drastically reduce overproduction and waste in the fashion industry. And that's why we all here are a big fan of your work, Vanessa, and what Another Tomorrow is doing for the fashion industry. So thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. I think everyone here really enjoyed it, and we can always keep the conversation going, exchanging emails through our network. And yeah, thank you again, everyone, Vanessa, and see you on the next one. Any final word, Vanessa?
No, just it's very mutual, and it really does take a village and then some. So having collaborative partners and ones that are, open to having tough conversations and tough questions to unlock this is really important. So please feel free if you want to continue the conversation on any of these topics. As you can see, I'm pretty passionate about it, and grateful for you and Platform. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Vanessa. Let's keep the work.
Amazing.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.